Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
Love what you do until you can do what you love. This is a famous quote that inspires people to seek out their dream job. I heard that quote at school before I graduated and entered the working world. What's that, you ask? Was I successful in achieving my dream? Well, I came this close. Let me tell you about it. My name is Max and I'm 19 years old. Poverty and I are intimate friends and constant companions. I live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. Most of the local citizens work at the seaport. The rest of us, we make a living by scavenging through and collecting rubbish. But I wasn't just an ordinary rubbish collector. No, sir, I was a specialist in that field, like my dad before me. Dad taught my brothers and me how to do it expertly. This is how it worked. Factories liked to use recycled materials to reduce the cost of buying new materials, so we would go to the city rubbish pile and separate out materials into different piles, such as plastics, glass bottles, milk cartons, tin cans, and so on. Then we would sell those materials to factories for reuse in making their products. This recycling process saved the factories a ton of money, but unfortunately, that didn't translate into a ton of money for us rubbish collectors. I had a dream one day of opening my own factory and just sitting back and watching the money flow in. When I told Dad that, he told me that good fortune only happens for a select few people. After hearing those words, I went to bed and dreamed about my future factory. Little did I suspect that my dream might actually come true someday. One day after working late collecting rubbish, while on the way home, I suddenly heard voices coming from a large rubbish pile in front of my home. It seemed that people were using that pile as a place of business to sell drugs and booze. An argument was brewing between two groups. Each group were wielding sticks and knives as makeshift weapons. One guy in Group A had a gun and shot someone in Group B, so someone in Group B stabbed gun guy in Group A. After that, a full-on fight ensued, with everyone in both groups joining in the fray. Within minutes, I heard approaching police sirens, which caused the fight to break up and both groups to run away, leaving the bleeding gun guy lying on the sidewalk. I tried to help him by staunching his bleeding. As I was doing so, I noticed a lottery ticket beside him with a letter saying that it was the winning ticket for $1 million payout. I froze. I looked around. No one was watching, so I acted, somewhat ignobly. Then I left quickly. If the police were to arrive and find me with the bleeding man, they might think that I had done it. I rushed home and fell into an easy chair, taking a deep breath of relief. While I was telling Dad about what had happened, there was a knock on the door. It was the Group A and B gangs. The spokesperson for the two groups held a knife in my direction and said, "Hand over the lottery ticket or die where you stand." Needless to say, I handed it over post-haste. But then he said, "I'm sorry. You've seen too much. You have to die." I pleaded, "But I didn't see anything, I swear." Suddenly, there was a flash from a camera, and the whole group of thugs began laughing. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. While relieved that my imminent death had been postponed, I was deeply saddened that I had lost my $1 million chance to get my dream factory. What rubbish.
7 years old can be a very critical age in a human's life. It's the year we graduate from first grade to second grade. It also may be the year when you first participate in a sport that will shape your future. But for me, it was the age when my parents decided they wanted to lead separate lives. I grew up like any average girl, attended a good preschool, participated in sports, and had good friends. My parents, as I recall, were always in a good mood with each other and shared the joy of raising their daughter together. I have few memories of the bad times my parents had argued. The worst memory I recall is lying in my bed one night when I was 7 years old and having my parents come into my room and my father saying, "Tanya, your mother and I are getting a divorce." My immediate reaction was a natural instinct for a young child, which was to blame myself. I often had more than one birthday party as a kid. This sounds cool, but it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. I'm a child of divorce. My childhood wasn't mine, it belonged to my parents. I lost myself in every effort to appease each side of my family. Shuffling alone between two separate lives meant that I was on the fringe of each family, never an insider. The people I loved most were never in the same room together, and many of them barely even knew each other existed. I missed out on events and celebrations because I would have to spend time with my other family. Children of divorce learn to cope with these struggles and instability by the age of 10. I no longer wanted to deal with it. I didn't want to live in two different homes with two different bedrooms, different clothes, different toys, different friends, and even different rules. I was a 10-year-old caught between a rock and a hard place. So one day I told my dad that I didn't want to visit anymore. It was a courageous and ignorant act, to be honest. We will never know if it was the right decision or not. But at the time, neither one of my parents possessed the emotional stability it would have taken to unearth a more positive solution. And so that was the way things went. The power struggle that had lain dormant between my parents erupted again, and this time it was directed at me. This time I was responsible for the discord. In one house, I was blamed. In the other, I was a victim. There were no more multiple birthday parties. Instead, there was stability and consistency in one house, anger and avoidance in the other. Choice is met with consequences, and as time went on, I fell out of touch with my dad's family. It's hard to stay in touch with people connected to someone we have pushed away. Cousins I used to play with were erased from my life. We never visited again. Was that because it's best to keep served ties cut? Or was it my punishment for being a horrible child? All I knew was silence and loss. When I was in my early teens, my mom remarried and I met new cousins. I learned new Christmas traditions and sat with new kids at the dinner table. Instead of being ushered from one family to the other, life settled down. Even though I heard from my dad only once or twice a year, life was fairly stable. But that changed again when my mom and stepdad split up during my first year of university. I tried to keep in touch with my family members every time I went home for the holidays. Again, I tried to please everyone while anxiety flooded my thoughts. Whom should I spend Christmas Eve with? Should I visit with this family or that one? Will they be offended if I don't make time to see them? Will they be offended if I don't bring presents? I would have loved to have everyone drop by and visit me, but that would not have gone very well at my mom's house. Instead, I diligently visited everybody on my own, carrying thoughtful little presents I bought on my student budget. I would make small talk and feel like an outsider. I was always the awkward guest, never the welcoming host. For 10 years after I graduated from university, I lived away from home. Not a single family member from any one of my four families, save for my mom, came to visit, called, or even let me know when they flew through town. Yet, every time I went home for Christmas, I scheduled visits, bought presents, and made time to see as many people as I could. I did this to make them feel good, not me. 2 years ago, I moved back home, and now I live less than a day's drive away from all four of my families, their new spouses, and young kids. We're all connected on Facebook, but my mom is still the only person who ever calls or visits. When I hear that a family member passed through town but didn't call, it saddens me. But I realized that they don't call because they don't really know me. To them, I was never a fixture. I was only ever around a few Christmases here and there, and although they were my family, I was never theirs. They don't know that they are just one of several people spread across four different families that I wasn't able to keep in touch with. Sometimes divorce spreads us too thin to make anything real, lasting family connections. This summer, I am getting married and starting my family. I'm trying not to have too many expectations. I know no family is perfect, but my soon-to-be husband is the king at keeping in touch with people. He's persistent, charismatic, forgiving, and loyal. He's teaching me what family means. Together, we will teach our kids to reach out to one another with compassion and to stick by each other through times of darkness. I'm looking forward to joy and friendship with my new family, and I plan to do everything I can to stay married.